Hello, everybody. That Matt85 here, and today we're doing a tech chat as usual on Saturday afternoons. And today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Sorry, as I'm a little fidgety here, trying to get camera and everything looking good. So let's see if I can not block Cloud's face here. Put myself down here. How about that? So, I was looking at kind of gaming news for the past week, and there wasn't a whole lot there. I've been saving this subject for a little bit, so I thought now might be a good time to talk about it. So, let's start out by me saying that I like Japanese games. On the whole, I prefer Japanese games over American games by a pretty decent amount. I feel like they have a lot more exploration, a lot more uniqueness, a lot more intervention. There we go. Innovation. I'm mixing up Disney terms with real terms. A lot more innovation to them, and a lot more quality to them. Again, on the whole. Even when I'm seeing like an American game that is a AAA 5-star game or whatever, if it's an American game, I don't have that much interest in it. Like American games, they're known for is the sports games, which I do appreciate. Also known for the first-person shooters, gangsters and thugs, blow people up, shoot people in the face, break the law, big muscular dudes, and greasy wars, blood and guts, all that crap. And as far as the Japanese games go, a lot of time you get this fantasy, unique characters, a lot more lighthearted, a lot more put together overall stories. It just appeals to me a lot more, especially in the realm of RPGs. As it comes to RPGs, American RPGs, really, I don't have many, if any, that I even enjoy at all. Whereas Japanese RPGs would be my bread and butter type of games that I'm always picking up and playing, that I find interest and want to try out. That being said, it's no secret that I'm a fan of Square Enix, or even the former Squaresoft. They put out the quality. They got a lot of franchises that have a legacy of great games, and they have some not so great games too. But specifically with Final Fantasy here, usually represents the best of the best, the newest, most high quality, high budget, most creative games every time that they release one. And especially lately, it's been a little weird with that, with games always being announced and then not appearing for a while, going 3, 4, 5 years between Final Fantasy games. Especially specifically numbered games, not spin-offs or Crystal Chronicles or stuff like that. But so let's say, since we're looking at Final Fantasy VII, the remake here, and why is my views a little weird on this? Well, I am a big fan of Final Fantasy. I'm a big fan of Square Enix. I'm a big fan of Japanese RPGs, but the original Final Fantasy VII. The original Final Fantasy VII was not a big fan of. One of my least favorite Final Fantasies. And within the fans of Final Fantasy, there's a big rift in which is your favorite Final Fantasy. And it differs, and of course it should differ. I'd like to categorize why people feel a certain way about certain games, but it is always different for different people, so I guess I shouldn't categorize. It's different from person to person. But from people I know who I've talked to who like Final Fantasy VII. A lot of times, the reason they give for loving Final Fantasy VII for it being their favorite is because um, basically it was their first one. It was such a big, if it wasn't their first one, it was such a big leap from Super Nintendo to PlayStation in terms of graphics and all that stuff. Um, it was not my first one. It's probably my second Final, well, technically my third Final Fantasy. I had Final Fantasy 1 as a kid on NES. Before I could read, I couldn't do anything in the game. Just wander around for a little bit and die. I didn't even realize you could save the game. That was kind of like a concept I didn't have as a kid. Um, Final Fantasy 9 would probably be my first real entry into Final Fantasy, and then went to 7, 8, and all over the place since then. But 7, so the problem with 7 with me, I kind of see what they're trying to do and all that. I thought the story was a little too convoluted. Things didn't really make sense. Things didn't really have a driving force for me. Characters didn't evolve that much or have that much character to them in general. Keep in mind when I say this, I'll explain it here. I didn't really like the graphics of the game, and that's not to say they had big blocky polygon figures. That I didn't mind. What I didn't really like, and I'll say this too, the pre-rendered cutscenes were beautiful, especially for the time, but even since then, beautiful pre-rendered cutscenes. But the problem I had with the art, as far as it goes, was it's very dark, dreary, muddled, blah. And that wasn't not really what I'm looking for. I guess kind of like a not very good take on Cyberpunk, at least, especially at the beginning inside Midgar. But even after that, with what's it called? Cosmo Canyons, I thought was really blah, just dark, muddied colors all over the place. I didn't really see Sephiroth as a big villain. He was just kind of floating around every once in a while and was cool. I didn't have a whole lot of feelings for Aerith. I didn't see, even within the story that Aerith and Cloud were a thing. There wasn't a whole lot of attraction between them or much interaction or anything showing that they were really a part of each other. Yeah, Cloud didn't say or do a whole lot. Barrett was probably the most fleshed out character, getting to yell and talk a lot. You kind of knew what he was thinking and what he was saying, what he was wanting to do. But it was just all I guess a little too bare for me. It took me a long while to finally sit down, go through, and beat it. So, Final Fantasy VII Remake comes out. People clamoring for it forever. It was in production forever. It looked like they kind of just threw away what they had after a couple of years and remade it again. And it comes out to a lot of fanfare. Again, Final Fantasy VII, not one of my favorite Final Fantasies, but it is Final Fantasy, and I'm checking it out. I'm kind of it's cool. Is this going to get kind of the treatment that their side games, their spin-offs have, or is it going to be the quality of a regular Final Fantasy game? And it's also weird that it's in parts. So the demo came out, and I'm like, it's a weird thing too. I don't really like demos. A lot of times I'm looking for more of a full experience, and the demo doesn't give you that full experience. It gives you a little shot, maybe test out what the battle systems are like, maybe see kind of what the visuals are like, but it doesn't give you characterizations or story. And a lot of times that turns me off of games. But I haven't had that much problem lately. That was kind of a thing of how it used to be. I don't know if it still is. But anyways, I got the demo for this, tried it out. I was very, very impressed by a lot of things. So I ended up getting the game, not immediately, but a little while after the game had been out, so that I could get it for a little bit cheaper do my normal thing where I try to beat it really fast and then resell it and make my money back. I haven't beat the game yet, but I've been going through it. I'm towards the end of it. And this isn't so much a review, but just I guess, talking about it and what I like about it. I haven't, when I'm rating things, games, movies, or otherwise, have a hard time giving up that perfect score for me, the 5 out of 5. I get a lot of 4 out of 5s, maybe too many 4 out of 5s, maybe too many 3 out of 5s. If something's honestly bad, 2 out of 5, I hardly ever go down to 1 out of 5 or possible 0. This is going to be a game that I am giving 5 out of 5, and I don't think that the ending's going to change it for me. And I've heard things that it's controversial, it's not what people wanted, but I'm keeping in mind that this game is part 1. So if it ends on a cliffhanger, it ends not resolving something, or, I'm also not a big fan of Final Fantasy VII, so in the ways that it's changing the story around, I don't mind. And we'll get to that. But this game has the full might and quality of Final Fantasy. Kind of in a way that Final Fantasy 15 did, but Final Fantasy 15 was under production for so long that they just kind of went, okay, this is what we have, let's release it. And I feel like they didn't get to finish it up and polish it up as much as they wanted to. And Final Fantasy VII, granted, it also was under production for a very long time. I think they did what they did with Final Fantasy XIV, where they fired the whole crew, got somebody else in, just went straight for it. This is what I'm doing, this is what I want to do, we're going to go and meet it, we're not going to keep exploring and trying to evolve the whole time that we're making the game. So they produce it and come out with it, and it seems like it has that polish. It has everything that it wanted to be. And as far as in terms of Square Enix goes, that's very, 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 very polished, very, very high quality game. So what do I like about the game so much? So a lot of times I can compare it to Final Fantasy VII. And it's not just that I like it because it's such a big step up from a PS1 Final Fantasy VII game. And I feel like it's going to be a little bit different from a lot of people that are like, I loved Final Fantasy VII, the original, and I need this to be exactly like it. That's definitely not the case for me, especially because I didn't like Final Fantasy VII. But again, I don't want to make it seem like how I thought about Final Fantasy VII is going to change how I feel about Final Fantasy VII, the remake, at all. I just think it's interesting to compare. So I was talking to you about the art before, how I didn't mind the blocky not pixelated, but blocky polygonal character models. That wasn't a big deal, but it was the blurry, muddy backgrounds and colors and tones that was used throughout the game. Well, that hasn't really changed in Final Fantasy VII, the remake. What has changed is that they were able to put a lot more detail into it. So you're still in these slums of these cities, but you're able to point out, put the detail into little dirt, grime, trash that's littering the streets, the pebbles and the rubble and of the demolished buildings, the old buildings, the smog that's in the air, the steel of the factories, and be able to add the other details that aren't just the dark and muddied and blah, but the neon lights of some of the cities, the manufactured daylight that they have, the parks that are hidden throughout that are luscious and green, the bright colors that the characters might wear, the background characters. There's a lot of the little details that really made the difference between just like a muddied down, depressing place in a more realistic, gritty setting. Again, something else I really liked about this in comparison to the original Final Fantasy VII was characters. There's so much more time spent with the characters, spent with having the characters develop themselves as characters and being able to show you through their dialogue, through their actions, what they are about. Have them evolve, have you get to know them, have you get to know their relationships with each other. It's very, very, very clear that Aerith likes Cloud in this game. It's very clear that Jesse likes Cloud in this game. It's very clear that Tifa likes Cloud in this game. And I guess that's not really the point, is that everybody likes Cloud, but um, even Cloud being more of a silent protagonist, he's not completely silent. He says stuff, he's just more of an introverted, mysterious kind of guy who's going to keep his thoughts and opinions and how he feels to himself and just deal with things as he needs to deal with them. And the pacing of the game, with it being part one, uh, being very long in itself, and they're not even out of Midgar, which would be like, I guess the first disc of Final Fantasy VII is part one here, but they've added a whole lot more. I know a lot of people have been wanting go through the game. They're like, we just want an open world, be able to go wherever you want type of game. I don't like this linearity where you have to go in this direction. If you try to go the wrong way, they pull you back and say, hey, you can't do that. At least where I've gotten to with Chapter 4, it's become an open world game, but I honestly, personally, do not love open world games. I don't like the linearity so much of, say, Final Fantasy 13, where you are just in a hallway and you go to the other end of the hallway. But this is a big environment that's connected, and it has you go from place to place in a way that seems natural. Well, so it is linear, but it doesn't have that constrained feeling that linear games often can have. I don't need it to be open world, but once you get to chapter 14 where I'm at, it pretty much is open world until you move on to the next stage of the game. And I think a lot of this is what would be called FOMO, or fear of missing out. People see a little piece of materia that they weren't able to grab and they wish they can go back and get it, but they can't, at least not until later in the game. Or they skipped a quest that they wish they would have completed, but they can't do it now, at least not until later in the game. And I don't think that's a big enough reason to really hate on the game. I mean, in fact, for me personally, it's made exactly how I want it. And if it were open world, more like say Final Fantasy 13 2, I wouldn't complain. They all have different ways of being played and different ways of being built, and as long as they don't make it like it's open world but restrict you to being linear, then that I mean they build the game to the way that it is made. So if it's linear and they build it to be linear, then that's great. If it was too linear and like there were all those stuff that you can't go back and get now because you moved past it without knowing it was there or didn't take the time to get it, that also would be a problem. But again, there's a point in which you can go back and get what you're looking for. It just might not be exactly when you want it. That way it kind of rewards you if you're doing the exploration and the extra stuff at the time, but still lets you go back and get it later if you're not putting all that time into it immediately. So, as far as the overall story goes, I'm completely following it. It making sense. It's going step by step what should be happening. It's not rushing. As I said, it's a lot more slower. And in that way, I'm loving the story. I know the original story, well, it's been pointed out, and it's probably true, that Sephiroth didn't play much, if any, in the story at this point of the game that this covers, the remake part 1 covers. So they kind of inserted him into flashbacks, dreams, and hallucinations that Cloud's having, and that is a completely unique experience. Probably, again, just to shoehorn Sephiroth in there because he's the big baddie of the whole series. An iconic character that people want to see. And I guess I don't really mind. We'll have to see how it really plays if it was really just shoehorned in there. It doesn't seem disappointed to where like it doesn't make sense or it's too over the top or it's just all over the place because they want Sephiroth's face on everything. But at the same time, it does feel like it didn't need to be there either. So I'm not saying I love it. I'm not saying I hate it. I'm just saying I don't mind what they're doing with it. And we'll have to see again if it plays off in the future psychologically to Cloud, if they keep that up, or if once Sephiroth finally actually arrives, if it plays into his head like that. What's the next part I want to talk about here? So there's a lot of little details. Um, just the environment's so detailed art wise. There's people everywhere in certain places. They're usually talking and they're all fully voiced when you're walking by, even in the background. When you're not specifically talking to them, you can hear conversations going on in the background. That's just an insane amount of detail that most people would skip because it's not, quote unquote, not worth it. And away from many games, it's not worth it. For Final Fantasy VII, perhaps they could have been very enjoyable anyways, but they're putting it all into this game. It's like going to Disney. Disney, if you haven't done Disney stuff, goes super over the top with guest service, making it special, making it immersive in all ways possible. And again, you pay a premium for that, but it just makes the game that much more enjoyable in a way that you can't get so many other places. And that's just a little thing that you may not notice, especially if you're not into creating video games. That I find impressive, but also immersive. Something that, again, I appreciate. Um, that's kind of the quality I'm talking about here. That um, they're able to use just a regular, I guess, not in combat, but regular game engine instead of having to use pre-rendered cutscenes for a lot of things. That way they can keep the weapon that you have equipped so it makes sense, or they can keep the clothing that you have equipped, armor and all that, in the cutscenes. They can keep what the characters look like in regular battle looking just as good as they do in the cutscenes. It's just in the cutscenes you have a bit more of a close-up, better angles to see what everybody looks like. And yeah, it's been very enjoyable in a way that I did not expect. It's one of the very few 5-star games in my book, really, right now. And I got a few others that I want to try out. And I don't mind, I don't usually go seek out what would be considered 5-star games. A lot of times I disagree with what others call that. But sometimes I'm starting to wonder if instead of trying to find the hidden gems of games, I should just go for some of the games that I'm pretty certain are going to be amazing experiences. Like I'm considering Ghost of Tsushima right now, just because of how amazing everybody's grading it, and also that it seems like my type of game. But if, let's say, for example, you have never played Final Fantasy VII, you have never possibly even played a Final Fantasy, possibly you're not even a fan of RPGs, especially JRPGs. This would be a fine game for you to play. And there's a lot of reasons why. The Final Fantasy games, if you're not aware, do not go off of each other. They're all individual stories. The franchise is basically just telling you of the quality and a few things that linger from game to game that honestly do not matter. They're just little things to look forward to if you've played the games before. Like, for example, chocobos are animals that are in the game. Mogs are animals in the game, kind of. You'll see magic that uses a rock, paper, scissors type tier of weakness and resistance, with fire, lightning, and ice being the main elements. And I don't know, like gil is considered their type of money, their currency. So that's the kind of thing that you'll see from game to game. Nothing that wouldn't make sense if you haven't already played the games anyways. This game, to make it more palatable, I guess Square Enix is kind of going in this way anyways, wanting to evolve their RPGs away from being turn-based games to being kind of more live-action battles. And this game has that active battle system where you're going around, you're honestly trying to dodge the enemy's attacks. You can throw up your shield with a block button, can aim your attacks for when they're not going to counterattack you back, try and get behind the opponent, use your special abilities, switch between which character you fight best as or makes more strategic sense. There's a normal mode, which for me has been challenging but not too hard. That is to say, I have lost a few battles before, but usually I don't. There's only been one spot where I could not get past, in which case you can change the difficulty setting, which I did down to easy and got past it very easily. But that is to say that there's also an easy mode in the battle system, which, from what I heard, for people that don't do RPGs well, don't have good reflexes, don't strategize well, you can pretty much get through with hacking and slashing and not having to worry about the strategy that much. Or if you're a fan of the old school strategy type turn-based action, there is even a mode for that called Classic, where you can play it like you would an older Final Fantasy VII game. And I believe if you beat the game, you can go through it again on a hard mode, which I don't think I want to do. I do prefer myself the turn-based combat systems, but I haven't been playing it on this game because I mean, I've already played Final Fantasy VII as a turn-based combat. Might as well have fun trying out the new system. It is fun as long as it's not overwhelming for me. Then it's just frustrating. Because I mean, like, you could spend a bunch of time. I'd rather have a general sense for the game, go in randomly seeing the boss without knowing about him, so I don't have to set all my materia to have all the advantages and know all of their weaknesses. I don't want to have to sit there and study their attack patterns, so I know when to attack, when to block, when to get back, when to run away, when to heal. I'd rather just have a general sense of, okay, so I see him start to attack, try to throw out a block, or he likes to attack with his tail, so being behind him doesn't matter that much, or possibly, like, you know, it's better to be further away and do ranged attacks. All general strategies, but nothing to where, like, if you do one thing wrong or if you're not set up right, you're not going to win. So if you're like me and you weren't a big fan of Final Fantasy VII, this could be a game for you for all the reasons I mentioned. If you are new to RPGs, new to Final Fantasies, this is definitely a good starting point. If you want to try something new, this is just such a high quality that there's something to gain from it, even if it just turns out, you know, you're just not an RPG person. You don't understand these Japanese customs and their tropes, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you. It doesn't appeal to you. At least you're going to get a great story, a visually stunning game to wander around in, and something to probably your best shot to ever liking these types of games right here. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave your comments. What have you liked about Final Fantasy VII, the remake? Have you tried it? Did you not like it? Yeah, I mean, are you looking forward to part 2? Will it be on PlayStation 5? Feel free to leave comments, and I'll try to respond back to you, especially if you have questions for me. Thanks for watching, and again, consider subscribing if you want to know when I have new videos out. Giving this a like if you enjoyed it at all. It all really matters and really helps me, especially as a new, I guess, as a newer person that's not as popular on YouTube, to further encourage me to keep making more content and more videos. Look forward soon, I believe, to a classic game review that I'm going to be doing for a Windows Vista era game. And of course, check out on Wednesdays on Twitch. I'm doing the Bear Side of the Mat wrestling, I guess, kind of reviews and news on the weeks in wrestling, as well as on YouTube, bearded reviews for movie reviews with my friend Pat. Again, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.